The WWE's Alexa Bliss has been missing in action for 2 months, ever since losing a Raw Women's Championship match to Charlotte Flair at the WWE's Extreme Rules pay-per-view. While the match itself was good, it ended with Bliss's doll Lily being torn apart as she spat and frothed and tried desperately to chew on a tab that was supposed to have dissolved in her mouth and just make her froth at the bit. She didn't. It was very clear that it looked like a massive mint on her tongue. Let's talk about where Alexa Bliss is, where she's been, and when she's going to come back. We'll be sharing exclusive backstage news in this video that you can't find anywhere else and breaking down all of the available information. So if you don't already know, I'm Tom Colohue, and if you're looking to learn more about what goes on backstage in the WWE, be sure to follow, subscribe, and like this video. Let's jump into the details of the situation and stay tuned to find out more about reaction from the wrestlers to the recent releases and how that may be affecting people returning on schedule. Alexa Bliss was thrown into the feud with Charlotte Flair after a number of storyline changes at the last moment had severely affected her booking and basically left her in complete limbo. She had originally been planned to continue working alongside Bray Wyatt, but then The Fiend Bray Wyatt, Wyndham Rotunda, was released, and this is of course after she was changed to be feuding with him when she was working alongside him against Randy Orton. The plan after this became working with Shayna Baszler, but a backstage segment between the two, featuring the Lily doll, was so badly received that the whole thing was abandoned pretty much immediately. As a result, Bliss was suddenly left with little to nothing to actually do. She was moved into a feud with Eva Marie, but by this point the WWE had already kind of given up on Eva Marie, so even this was vastly forgettable and kind of abandoned out of nowhere. In the end, Bliss and the WWE agreed that she would take some planned time off, and as a result, she was lined up against Charlotte Flair as a way to write her out effectively. There was no intention for a championship win, it was just a marquee match for Extreme Rules that could write her out with an intense and somewhat extreme incoming character change. Also, to be fair, this allowed Alexa Bliss a chance to work with one of her closest friends in the WWE, Charlotte Flair. Bliss wanted time off for a number of reasons. There was mention of a sinus surgery, and this is something that happened early on in her time away. Also part of this though was that Bliss had apparently been going through a bit of a rough time. We'll talk about how she's responded to the recent releases, but first it's worth pointing out that losing friends from the company she would work at every day, and of course losing her pig Larry Steve, had a clear effect on her, and she's been very open about that. The WWE scripted the feud of Charlotte purely to write her comfortably off of the company and give her some time away. However, she's had her surgery now. Bliss wants to come back. She's been open about that even just on Twitter, regardless of how the WWE management may react to it. So why hasn't the WWE brought back one of the most recognisable women in wrestling? Right now, the WWE are deciding who to keep in the company and who to get rid of. A large part of this is tryout matches and throwing people out there with hopes for the best. Eva Marie, as an example, was heavily featured week on week until suddenly she wasn't anymore. The WWE have decided to take a good look at as many of their lesser used talent while they can. And having someone such as Alexa Bliss out of the way is beneficial to that. Essentially, the WWE hasn't really wanted her to come back just yet. Here's another little exclusive for you. Becky Lynch was recently asked, upon being told that she was moving to Raw, who she wanted to work with between Survivor Series and the Royal Rumble. This is somewhat traditional for champions. Steve Austin chose to work with Mick Foley way back when, instead of Triple H, for example. Brock Lesnar chose to work with The Big Show repeatedly on the advice of Paul Heyman, and Becky Lynch herself, quite recently, chose to not only work with Asuka, but also then hand the championship off to Asuka when she became pregnant. Becky Lynch selected a variety of names of people who were going to be on Raw, or who would have been on Raw, that she wanted to work with. That included Liv Morgan, but did not include Alexa Bliss. So, even if Alexa Bliss had been there was no planned championship storyline at the very least. What I'm saying is that, when the champion was asked who she wanted to work with, Alexa Bliss's name didn't come up. The WWE are putting focus into other wrestlers, so pitches and concepts for Bliss, they've dried up. In fact, they've kind of forgotten about her until recently. Finally, as promised when it comes to the news, there have been some issues when it comes to the latest releases. Bliss has a number of friends in the WWE locker room, and I don't just mean women, I mean overall, she at least had a number of friends who are no longer with the company. The big effect was apparently losing Nia Jax, especially given that Bliss wasn't there at the time and wasn't available to help Nia Jax when she needed a mental health break, though they did still connect and have done so recently. Bliss knows the full story as to what went on with Nia Jax, and we don't. I can't say she's reacted particularly well to that one. The final question here is about when Alexa Bliss will be back, and just before we jump in, remember to like and subscribe for more exclusive information that you can't get anywhere else going from here. Alexa Bliss is ready to return and is expected to be back soon. The WWE has clear plans for its women's division. They do not involve Alexa Bliss. And with everybody on SmackDown going to Raw as well, at least this week, this doesn't seem the right time. Anyone currently working for the WWE who isn't on TV has been told that they are expected back in the build to the Royal Rumble. So we can expect to see Alexa Bliss returning in the build to that, if not before. While Bliss is ready, and we could see her at any time, the Royal Rumble is when everybody will be returning to action. Happy with the WWE or not, I would expect to see Bliss back by then. Sean says, Becky not wanting to work with Alexa, do they have heat or something? Not to my knowledge. It may simply be that she didn't mention her because she felt other people needed the opportunity. To be clear, I did not mention anything there with any intention of vindictiveness on any side. She didn't mention her. Maybe because she wasn't available. I just know that she didn't mention her. Hector is here. Welcome, Hector. Saying props to Alexa for dealing with all the hate with the Fiend stuff she got. She's such a top-class act and deserves a lot more credit than she gets. I completely agree with all of that. I've only met her briefly, but she is a lovely person who deserves a hell of a lot better than she's had from basically the entirety of wrestling fandom. As we know, people are dicks. People are dicks. Only way to say it. Only way to say it.